that walked in. Thank you. Okay, so I'm going to share some stories with you tonight. I have owned 4 cars in my life, and I would like to share you some stories with you about each of those cars. The first story starts in the middle of the night, somewhere south of Chandler, in the middle of nowhere, Arizona. I was driving my 1985 Toyota Cressida, and it was overheating. The little needle was in the red. And I had already stopped once and let the car cool down, and I had put water in the radiator, and it was still overheating. And so when I pulled over the second time and I looked, the radiator was full, and so it was beyond my knowledge of how to fix it. So I ended up in a rest stop. And I pulled the car into a space, and I turned it off, and I rolled down the windows, and I wasn't sure what else to do. The rest stop was completely desolate. There was nobody there. It was just the stars and the dark desert night and the heat. And when I turned off the car, my daughter, who was in the back seat, woke up and started crying. And so I went and I got her out of her car seat, and I sat on the curb next to the car, and I was rocking her, and she was crying, and I was singing to her, trying to get her to go back to sleep, and I'm crying, and I'm thinking, what am I gonna do? I had no one to call. I had no way to get home. I had no money for a tow or a ride or I don't know what. I was stuck. Now this 1985 Toyota Cressida was my first car. I bought it in 1997 in the fall of my senior year in college. I was a senior at the University of Arizona. I was also a bartender at an Applebee's and the single mother to a 1-year-old. The previous year, she and I had lived without a car. I had found a sitter in my apartment complex so I could walk her to the babysitter. I walked to the grocery store, and often decisions about what I was going to buy was determined by how much room was in the backpack. So toilet paper was bought in single rolls because a 4-pack took up too much space in the backpack. And the hour-long bus ride to the university made those 8 a.m. classes especially painful. So that Cressida was a godsend. It changed my life. It also meant that I could visit my sister, who was a sophomore at Arizona State in Tempe, which is about the distance between here and Columbus. My parents lived back east, so the ability to drive to see my sister was priceless. And that is how I ended up in this desert situation. That morning, I had gotten up and packed a diaper bag and clothes and food, and we had driven to Tempe and spent the day with my sister, and it was amazing. And I probably should have left earlier to come home, but in my mind, I thought as long as I could get up and go to school in the morning, I was fine. And we stayed pretty late. And so now, here I am. It's the middle of the night. And I'm thinking, I'm gonna have to sleep with the snakes and the scorpion and the cactus. And then this truck pulls into the rest stop. It was this beat-to-hell red pickup truck. And instead of pulling into a parking spot, they pulled behind me. And it was a husband and a wife, and they rolled down the window. And the husband had this unkept long beard, and the wife was wearing this faded floral shirt. Both of them looked like they had spent a lot of time in the sun, maybe on a ranch, which would have made sense in the part of Arizona that we were in. And they asked me if I was okay. And my first reaction was to tell them, yeah, I was fine, because my fear of strangers was more than my predicament at the moment. But the truth was that as soon as I tried to say something, those tears became sobs, and I told them I was not all right. So they parked the truck and they got out of the car, and the wife offered to hold my daughter, and the husband popped the hood and he looked at the car and he told me he thought it was the thermostat. And he went and got some tools and he took the thermostat out of the car and handed it to me, and he told me that I could probably make it to Tucson without the thermostat, as long as I kept the heat on, which was unbearable in Arizona, but I could make it. And so they gave me my daughter back, we got in the car, and they offered to follow me for 2 exits and to check the car and make sure that I could get home. Now, 2 exits in this part of Arizona was a long distance. It was more than 20 minutes before I got off of the highway. And when I say it's the middle of nowhere, the exit that I got off at, the second exit, the end of the ramp, which was paved, was a dirt road. It was pitch black. It was like legit ghost town territory. So I pull off, pitch black. They get out of the car. He comes over, pops the hood, flashlight, tells me I'm good to go. And I get back on the highway. And those angels got back on the highway in the other direction. They had gone 40 minutes out of their way to make sure that I got home safely. And I often think about that night because I don't know how I would have gotten home. I don't know their names. I don't know who they are. I don't know why they were in that rest stop. I don't know why they stopped to help me. You know, they could have seen me and decided that I was a decoy and that some guy was waiting in the shadows to take them for all that they had, but they didn't, and I wasn't, and I got home because of them. You know, in our social media feeds and our screens, you know, we're told that helping a stranger puts us in danger. But I would like to believe that there are angels just like them everywhere. Ordinary people like you and me that are willing to help someone else in need. Because that's the kind of world that I want to live in. I made it back to Tucson. The next day, I took the car to a mechanic and I got a thermostat. And I had that car for about another year until I graduated, and I sold it in order to make enough money to buy 2 plane tickets to Pittsburgh, where my parents lived. My goal was to get a job and some money and quickly buy another car. But life had different plans. After living with my parents for about 4 months and saving every penny that I earned from my full-time, in my chosen career field job, I had a pretty good chunk of change. And I was going to get an apartment and a car and all those things, and then I fell in love with a little 2-bedroom Cape Cod in an adorable neighborhood with a mortgage that was about the same as I would have paid for an apartment, and I decided to buy a house. Now, I wasn't a stranger to public transportation, and I had a house in walking distance to the park and a little pizza place where they sold pizza by the slice and ice cream by the scoop. And my daughter had a bicycle with training wheels and a sandbox, and I mowed the lawn with a push mower that had no gas or electric, just a lot of determination. In Pittsburgh, there's a subway system. It's called the T. Outside of the city, it's above ground, and in the city, it's underground. And it is packed during rush hour because people that work downtown, a lot of people work downtown, take the T. And so that they don't have to drive through traffic and park and all that kind of stuff. And so taking the T to work was not uncommon. However, I didn't work downtown. And so my commute looked something like this. I'd get up in the morning and pack a diaper bag and a lunch, and I would put my daughter in a stroller, and we would walk about a mile to the closest T station. And then we would get on the T and we would go into downtown, and we'd get off of the T and I'd put her back in the stroller, and we would walk to the bus depot, where we would get on a bus to the north side of the city, where I would take her to an old church that had been converted to a daycare center, and would drop her off, and then I would take my laptop bag, and I would get on another bus to go to an island in the Allegheny River where I worked. And on this island, there was one bus stop. And the bus stopped there twice in the morning and twice in the evening, and that was it. And there was only one person that ever got on or off the bus at that bus stop, and that was me. The bus driver knew me because I was the only one. I worked for a robotics company at the time, and this was the early 2000s when technology was booming, and technology companies across the country were recruiting young talent with pretty good wages and perks. For example, the company that I worked with, they recruited people with free beer happy hours on Fridays, and a ping pong table in the break room, and a nap room where you could nap at work. So the idea that I couldn't afford a car was weird. And everybody in my office knew that I was the weirdo who took the bus. They also knew that I was a single mom, and they had my back. Often coworkers were offered to take me the first leg to the daycare center to shorten my commute home. And my boss got me a laptop so that I could work from home, which during that time was really not that common. So when Alan from the engineering department heard about a car for sale, he told me about it. He said, "Bridget, it's a piece of shit, but it runs, and it's only $250. So, for this story, I looked up with inflation what $250 would be today, and it would be $340. Which is still amazing. $340 for a car that runs. So I told him I'll take it. The only problem is, I didn't have $250. I was living paycheck to paycheck, learning the hard way that homeownership is far more expensive than renting, even if the mortgage is similar to rent. And I just didn't have $250. So the entire commute home, bus, subway, mile walk home, I racked my brain, how can I come up with $250? I was thinking maybe I could sell plasma. Maybe I could sell a kidney. Maybe I could sell stuff at my house, but my 13-inch black and white TV was not gonna cut it. I wasn't coming up with $250. The next day was Friday. I got to work, and Alan offered to drive me the next morning, Saturday morning, to go to see the car and to buy it. And I told him, yes. I will have the money. I didn't want to admit to him that $250 was as far out of my reach as $2,500 was, because I wanted that car. That afternoon, my boss called me into his office, and he told me to sit down. And on his desk was an envelope. And he told me that he had put my name in for an award, Employee of the Month, for a project that I had completed the previous month. And he told me that I got the award and that it came with a small bonus. And he said, it's not a whole lot, so don't spend it all in one place, but I appreciate you. And he hands me the envelope. And I went back to my cubicle and I opened it. After taxes, it was $271. I'm not ashamed to admit that I went to the ladies' room and lost my shit. The next morning, Alan picked me up and I bought that piece of shit. It was a 1983 Ford Thunderbird V6. It was baby blue. The rear wells were completely rusted. The shocks were so bad that every bump reverberated through the entire metal frame. It had the passenger side door could only open from the outside because the inside panel was completely falling off and held on by string. It was rear-wheel drive, which in the hilly Pittsburgh winter was really actually quite dangerous, but I had a car. And it actually was a piece of shit, so it broke down all the time. And I learned really quickly how to work on cars. In fact, I changed the thermostat on that car by myself. I also replaced the radiator and a dozen or so hoses before I finally saved up enough money to buy my next car. I got a roommate and a raise. And I was able to buy my next car. I gifted the hoopty to a couple who had it for another 6 months before she ended up in the junkyard. My boss had no idea that he was being an angel that day. All that he knew was that he was showing me gratitude for the hard work that I had done. And isn't that how it happens sometimes? We show up and do the work, believing in the outcome. Even though the drudgery of the journey sometimes can feel never-ending. The heat of the summer, the cold of the winter, and sometimes we just don't want to keep going. But when we do, when we show up, when we do the work, we create abundance. And we open the doors for the angels to show up. So that car that I bought and saving up the next money was a 1998 Honda Civic. 4-door, it was gray. It came with a warranty. It was a certified used car. It came with a warranty and a 5-year loan. And for $207 a month, I had a car that could stop in the snow and it didn't guzzle gas. And I loved that car. My 3.5-year-old daughter named her Rosa. And for this story, I called to ask her why, because I couldn't remember why, and she didn't know why either. So none of us know why, but Rosa was with us for 12 years. Rosa lasted longer than my husband. I was driving Rosa when I met him, and I drove in Rosa away. Rosa would tell if she was here, because 12 years is a long time, and there are a lot of stories with Rosa and I, but the story that I picked for tonight was when Rosa and I helped a man on the side of the road. So at the time, the car was full. I had a 2-year-old in the car seat, and my daughter was 10, and then there were 2 other 10-year-olds, all 3 of them in their Girl Scout uniforms. We had just left a Girl Scout event. I was taking them home. The car was full. And we were on a highway about an hour north of Philadelphia, outside of Doylestown, Pennsylvania, which is where I lived at the time. And the highway was kind of like 35 between Xenia and Chillicothe, where it's highway, but there's like not very many people on it. And it was like springtime, early summer, it was hot. And we were driving, and there was this car broken down and had the flashers on. And a little while further, there was a man walking, and he was kind of hunched over, and he was shuffling his feet. And again, it's hot outside. So I pulled over the car, and I backed up to meet him. And I got out of the car, and put the flashers on. I got out of the car, and I said, is that your car back there? And he said, yes. And I said, have you called anyone? And he said he didn't have a phone. And so I offered to make a phone call for him. And he said, I'd really like to call my wife. And so I handed him my phone, and he fumbled with the phone for a minute, and then he gave it back to me until he had never used a cell phone before. So I asked the number, and I called his wife, and I put her on speaker. And she was obviously worried, asking him where he was. And he told her that he was okay, but that the car broke down, and that he was coming home. And I could hear on the other side of the phone that she was getting upset, and she was like, Jim, it's really hot outside, are you okay? He said, yes, honey, I'm fine. She said, I don't care about the car, just come home. Just come home. And if I had room in the car, I would have driven Jim, whose grandchildren, maybe great-grandchildren, were older than those girls in the car, but I didn't have any room. And so I offered to call him a tow truck, and we called AAA, and they told us it was going to be 45 minutes. And I look, and in the back of Rosa are these, 3 little 10-year-old girls with their faces up against the window watching what's going on, and I can't wait 45 minutes, but Jim can't wait 45 minutes either, and so I don't know what to do. And so I called the police, and a young local sheriff showed up with a bottle of water and offered to stay with Jim and thanked me. And I got in the car and answered the million questions that the girls had, and we went home. And I honestly probably would have forgotten about the incident if the next part of the story hadn't happened. A couple weeks later, there was another Girl Scout event, and it was directly after school. And at the time, I was a stay-at-home mom with a toddler, and so I offered to coordinate the caravan to get the girls from school to the Girl Scout event, and then the parents could pick them up afterwards. And so there were emails sent out, and 2 other moms volunteered, and so there were 3 cars when taking to school to go to this event. And then I got a phone call that night from one of the moms. And she said to me, "I don't want my daughter in your car." And I said, "Okay, can I ask why?" And she said, "Because last time my daughter was in your car, you put her life in danger." And I honestly didn't know what she was talking about. Like it took me, I was like, I'm not sure. So then she described it, and I remembered Jim. And so I told her the story, and I was like, no one's life was ever in danger. And she said, "You never know, he could have had a gun." And I said, "Well, I don't think anybody's life was in danger." And she said, "Well, I want you to promise that you will not stop to help anyone while my daughter is in the car." And I said, "Well, I will arrange for your daughter to be in another car." And then she got very angry and said, "Well, then maybe I'll just tell all the other moms what you do with their daughters in the car." And I said, "Okay, you can do that. But if I run into Jim tomorrow, I'm going to do the same thing." And then I said, "You know what?" Well, and then she said, aren't you afraid that you're being a bad example for your daughter and for these girls?" And I said, "You know what? I would really hope that if I was stuck on the side of the road, that someone would come and help me. And I hope that your daughter does remember. Because one of the Girl Scout badges that they were working on was called the Do Good in the World badge." That girl never rode in my car again. And we moved to Dayton about 2 years later, and so I don't know where she is in the world, but I honestly hope that she remembers. And I hope that she remembers and that she takes the Do Good in the World badge to heart, and that somewhere, someday, she goes towards someone in need and not away, because we need more angels in the world. And to her mom, this next story, if you think talking to Jim was bad, this next story is going to really piss you off. So for my final story tonight, some of you probably have already heard this story, and it's on my website. So this story was the story that I told at the Moth in Louisville. And it is about car number 4, which is Ella the Elantra, a 2002 Hyundai Elantra. And it takes place at a rest stop outside of El Paso, Texas. My 11-year-old son and I were traveling across the country. And on this particular day, we had started our drive in Houston, Texas, and our destination was Tucson, Arizona, which is 16-hour drive if you don't stop. It took us 22 hours. So we had stopped in El Paso for a break to get some food and some rest and recharge for the rest of the trip. And as we were leaving this massive truck stop and to get onto I-10, there was a man with a cardboard sign, and on it had 4 letters, A-R-I-Z. And instantly I got excited because I'm going to Arizona, that's where we're going to Arizona, and I pull over the car. And he picks up his bags, and in the next instant, I realize I can't take this man to Arizona. Now, by this point, you know it's because I'm not afraid. The real reason that I can't take this man to Arizona is because at this point in my life, everything that I owned was in that Hyundai Elantra. And so my son was in the passenger seat, and the back seat was completely full of our belongings. And I literally did not have room for another person. But by the time I realized that, he had already gotten his bags and he was walking towards the car. And so I rolled down the window, and like an idiot, I fumbled some like, we're going to Arizona, and I saw your sign, and I wanted to keep, but I can't take it to Arizona because I get stuff in the car, I'm really sorry. And I fumbled for some cash, and I gave him some money, and then we drove away. And as we're driving away, I am like lamenting out loud. I'm like, I cannot believe that I just did that. I just gave that man hope. And then I had the audacity to tell him that we're driving to Arizona. And now we're driving away, and he's still standing there. And so my son is listening to me like, say all this out loud. And he says, Mom, what will happen if nobody comes to pick him up? And I said, I don't know, bud. And then we were quiet for about 15 minutes as I was driving like 70, okay, maybe 75, I mean 80 miles an hour on I-10. And then I looked over and I saw his face. And I said, what's up, bud? And he said, I could have squished. And I said, bud, what do you mean? And he said, I could have squished in the back, Mom. And I said, bud, it'd be 5 hours. You'd be squished for 5 hours. And he said, that's okay. And I said, do you want to go back? And he said, yeah, let's go back. So I got off the next exit and we went to a gas station and I parked in front of the dumpster. And we opened the back doors and we started going through our belongings to throw away enough stuff to get just enough space for his tiny frame amongst the fabric of our clothing. He had to sit with a cooler where his feet would be, and we propped things up on the side so we could lean on them. And we went back. And we went to the exit ramp, and he wasn't there. But I remembered I had given him some money. So we went to the McDonald's and we found Philip eating a cheeseburger. And we offered him a ride. And as we were getting into the car, my son asked Philip what he would have done if we hadn't come back. And Philip pointed to some bushes between the parking lot and the highway and said, I probably would have slept right there. My son looked at me with his face and said, totally worth squishing for. Over the next 5 hours, I learned a lot about Philip. I learned that he had grown up in upstate New York, that he had been traveling and living this way for more than 25 years, that he used to ride the rails, but that had gotten dangerous and so hitchhiking was safer, that he never begged for money, that he always worked for his money, anything that paid him cash, washing dishes or picking fruit, and that he never stayed more than 6 months in any one place because, as he said it, people are at their best when they are new. But the biggest thing that I learned from Philip was about making space. Because how often in our life do opportunities or people show up and we're so full of judgment and opinions and stuff that we don't have room and we miss out on the Philips of our life. I honestly don't remember what I threw away in that dumpster. I remember there was a lot of discussion and deliberation about what we actually needed and what we could do without. But I won't ever forget Philip. I won't forget his smile. I won't forget his stories. I won't forget his stench. And the the truth is that all we have to do is make a little bit of space for opportunity and then squish. About a month ago, I saw a Facebook post with the hashtag "Do Good Recklessly." I'm not sure if it was from your grandma or not, but it struck me. And I have often been told that I am reckless, that I am a bad example, that my kindness puts me and others in jeopardy. And after sharing that story, it has been brought to my attention even more. But you know what that post said? It said, what others do with my kindness is on them. What I do when I see others in me is on me. And we get the choice whether or not we're going to be angels, whether or not we are going to do the work. We're going to stand up and do good. So you know what? Call me a reckless driver. Ella the Elantra and I, we're okay with that. Thank you.